thank you very much. It has been fascinating discussion so far. I'm really looking forward to the next speakers. So what I will try to do maybe briefly is to look at how the JCPOA could be, well, not the JCPOA, the situation around the Iranian nuclear program as a whole could be made more sustainable. We are now in the middle of negotiations for all the original members of the JCPOA to return to their commitments. There is a good chance this will happen. At least there is interest on both sides. We don't know if it will happen, but it can. And it also seems that we are talking to getting back to the JCPOA as it was on implementation day, January 16, 2016. But even if we get there, the big question would be how we make the whole situation more sustainable in the long run. And the question was there from the beginning. Limitations on the numbers and types of centrifuges was supposed to go away in 10 years. Limitations on level of uranium enrichment and the stockpile would have to disappear in 15 years. Now it's 5 years and 10 years almost instead of 10 and 15 years. So obviously, some of those issues are even more pressing now than before US withdrawal and the things which followed. As it seems to me, the JCPOA generally was based on a number of assumptions, which some of them were more clearly stated, some less. There was a general feeling that successful implementation of the JCPOA will change the dynamics of US-Iranian relationship. Yes, sorry. And you can maybe build something on that. There was sort of idea that when limitations on numbers and types of centrifuges and limitations on level of uranium enrichment and a stockpile will go away, this will be fine. It was not a bug, it was a feature. So people say, yeah, once 10, 15 years pass, then Iran would be as a normal country, a member of JCPOA, a member of NPT, which, there's no restrictions on any other country regarding stockpile. So that's okay. The idea was a strict verification is the most important part, and that would stay forever, as we said, with additional protocol. And there were some built-in possibilities for future nuclear talks in the JCPOA, because Iran was supposed to ratify the additional protocol pending parliamentary actions. And I remind you, it was just an agreement between executives. So, President Rouhani had no control over this. And then again, US would lift sanctions instead of simply waiving them, again, pending the congressional elections, which executive had no control of. So it was sort of understood that there probably will be some, those things would be connected. There will be some talks about those in the future. And then, of course, US primary sanctions were never touched. And then Iranian permanent restrictions were never touched. So probably there was some hope that this will be touched once we move forward on some of those issues. There was no successful implementation of the JCPOA, as we know now. And of course, even now, there is this question that even if both sides, all the sides get back to the compliance, if the next US president would withdraw, and we'll start this whole issue again. And there is no, no safeguard you can really add to stop US from withdrawing from the deal. That's why I'm very skeptical that Iran would agree to anything permanent this time. And I don't think Iran would agree, for example, to dismantling of any centrifuges it built. I mean, temporarily disabling it, yes, but nothing, on things you can then change. Enrichment was very demonized in this process, and including partly by Iran itself, because Iran was using the limits on enrichment, the number of centrifuges, the percentage of enrichment, as a political, actions with which it was showing the US that this plan is not working, showing to Europeans that they should have to do something. But this whole talk about the how Iran is now closer to the bomb every time you see another enrichment limitations going away, this makes this whole thing about Iran just getting back to being a normal country under the NPT much less sustainable. It wasn't sustainable in the first place, but it is getting even less sustainable now. I don't think the verification part was changed in any way or form. There is an understanding that verification is critical. We still have the verification ongoing, and we hope there'll be some extension with IAEA, so we wouldn't lose this, sort of chain of custody thing when we, continue to have the same information and not to start from scratch. And then the future talks are up in the air, and Eric described a lot of the possible approaches to those talks. As I said, it is not new. All those issues have been discussed before, and I remember talking to a high-level Iranian official in 2015 and saying, how do we move forward? Because some limitations will go off, and then Iran can enrich in any levels it wants. So what do we do about it now? And his response was, well, maybe Iran will not go beyond those levels because there is no need for it, either politically or economically. There no real reason for do it in that sense. And also the one thing which has always been hanging over the top of Iranian leadership is this famous Netanyahu's limits, the red line which he put out, and saying that if you enrich this number of uranium, we're going to bomb you. It was never withdrawn, so I guess Iranians will have to consider that when they plan for the enrichment capabilities. However, this is an open question if the West and its allies will have to live with Iranian self-restraint and just believing that Iran will restrain itself without any agreed limitations. So one other thing which was very much discussed in 2015 and before in the coming to the Iranian nuclear deal was the regional fuel cycles, making Iranian enrichment capabilities regional capabilities by creating some kind of joint stock company where countries of the region could have shares and they would get the enrichment from that. Obviously, it was not successful in 2015. But there are some reasons why it will get even harder if we ever get back to this idea. One obvious reason for that would be that with all of those assassination explosions, Iranians would be even less willing to get anybody even close to their enrichment capabilities. The other possible complication would be we'll have presidential elections in Iran in a month, and probably will get a much more conservative administration, which could be much less interested in any flexible arrangements like this. But then again, the Middle East changed since 2014 and 2015. We have United Arab Emirates having their NPPs coming online, which they will have to find enrichment from somewhere. Koreans, which are building them, do not have their own enrichment, so they're buying it from Russians, for example. So it seems that there is some realignments or possible realignments going on in the Middle East. You can see that Biden administration may be less interested in the Middle East, maybe less interested in giving the countries in the Middle East a free pass. Could be increasing interest in the Gulf states, in other states in the Middle East, in some kind of cooperative relations, or at least relations as a whole with Iran. So we might just get back and revisit some of those old ideas. I'm not saying about WMD free zones in the Middle East, which is still ongoing and probably will be ongoing for a long time. But if the countries of the region would be left to their fate, so to say, they'll have to figure out how to move forward on their own. Maybe there'll be much more interest in cooperation, and some of those things could be addressed there. On the Russian, approach to all of those things, and to where does Russia stand on any future negotiations? Generally, there is a difference, significant difference between Russia's approach to Iran and the Western approach to Iran. First is a difference on the nuclear issue, and Russia started this whole process with believes that Iran is not building nuclear weapons. Iran is using its nuclear program for mainly political reasons, and it's using it as a bargaining chip. When you start your thinking with the assumption that Iran is not building nuclear weapons, the picture is very different for you than if you are starting from assumption that Iran is building nuclear weapons. So for Russia, it was, okay, so what can we do so that the West would be satisfied and not, be freaking out about Iranian capabilities? And what can we get Iran in return so they wouldn't be freaking out that they are super limited by illegal limitations which they have under the Article 4 of the NPT, for example. And on the on the regional side of things, Russia has no problem with Iran trying to establish regional hegemony, in the same way as Russia has no problems with Saudi Arabia trying to establish regional hegemony, or Turkey trying to establish regional hegemony. It's what countries in the region do if they're big and powerful and they're trying to shape the regional dynamics in their favor. As long as this is happening without wars or without major perturbations, that's how the world works. You cannot just, well, you can pick a side and then try to support this side, but Russia is not picking sides in the Middle East, except for Syria, maybe. In that case, everything else is a fair play. Iran is Russia's neighbor. Russia doesn't want it to be destabilized in any way. So, keeping the situation stable, and then, you do whatever. So in that sense, Russia would be happy if there would be any, future negotiations with the US, which would make this deal sustainable. As I said, we are now in 2021. In 2024, there could be a new US president, which could be Donald Trump again, and we, get the whole thing start over again. So if there is any kind of solution which would be much more durable, Russia would be fine with it. There was, I can admit that there was some fears in Russia in the process of negotiating of the JCPOA that Iran would go westward, that the West and the US and the Europeans would get full access to Iran, and that would be could be bad for Russia in a sense. I think those fears are largely gone. I don't think anybody believes now that there is a possible rapprochement with the West, with Europe, with the United States after the implementation of the JCPOA. And there is a huge feeling in Iran that you cannot trust the Europeans and the Americans. And you can, if you're trying to build your economic sustainability, you would have to deal with countries which are not just leaving you at any moment. Well, they all do, but to different extents. So you'll work with China, you'll work with Russia, with India, with Central Asian countries, your closest neighbors, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, I think that this factor is much less relevant now. So yeah, I'll try not to take all the time, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.